Rejoice in the Lord always, I heard Paul say to me. But how can I rejoice with chaos all around me? Rejoice in the Lord always, Paul whispers in my ear. But then I hear the second verse, for the Lord is near. Present in the good, the bad, the in-between, present in the fear, present in both security and uncertainty, present with me here. Present when I wake and present when I sleep, present when I dance and present when I weep. Present always, the Lord is near. So I will rejoice, though the future is unclear. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Because the Lord my God is near, I raise my hands and lift my voice.
Good morning. Good to see all of you. Thank you for being here. My name is Joe. I'm the lead pastor here, and I'd love to get to meet you. If I've not met you, I'll be right out in the commons after the service. Come by, say hello. I want to welcome those who are watching by live stream as well. Thank you so much for sharing your Sunday morning with us wherever you are. We're really glad that you have. We've been talking about this rejoicing stuff. And last week, Ryan, our young adult and teaching pastor, shared with you how he defined rejoice. He gave you an example of that. He talked about when our Texas Rangers won the World Series, he ran around the backyard and then announced root beer floats for everybody in the house. Well, I don't know if you rejoice that way or not. Valerie and I had something coming up a couple of weeks ago, and we kind of worried it might not go well. Actually, it went better than we could have ever expected, and so we just decided that what we would do is we'd celebrate. So we took a trip to Dollar General, and this is our version of root beer floats right here. This is how we do it. And I want you to know that was a special occasion because that stuff never makes it in our house. I'm married to the food police, and I'm telling you, that stuff, it was good that night. It was awesome. But I have this question for you. What if that thing we had worried about didn't go well? It actually went as bad as we thought it might. Would we still have had DiGiorno and drumsticks at the house? What if, don't stone me, what if the Texas Rangers had actually not won the World Series? Yeah, we've all been there, done that, right? Yeah. You know, would the Russells still had root beer floats? We're supposed to rejoice in all things. All ways, all times, all circumstances, all conditions, all situations. We're to rejoice. 12 times in this letter we're going to look at again today in Philippians chapter 4. 12 times in that little letter, Paul uses the word joy or rejoice, and he's writing from prison when he does that. So I got to tell you something. You may not think I have a thing to share with you about joy because I don't know what's going on in your life. Well, friend, here you are in the free world, and Paul's in jail, and he says, rejoice always. I think we should listen to the boy, all right? I really think we should. Let's do that. Let's look in Philippians chapter 4. We've talked about how we're going to rejoice, even in our grief. We've talked last week about how we're to rejoice, regardless of our financial circumstances. Today, we're going to look at rejoicing because there's hope, even in seasons of doubt. Seasons of doubt. Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always, Philippians 4:4. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your gentle spirit be known to all people. The Lord is near. Paul says that rejoice is a choice. It's something we do, not something we feel. It's something we actually demonstrate. Participate in. It is a verb. Rejoice is a choice. It's something we intentionally seek out to do. He makes it clear that there are circumstances in our life. Those immediate, temporal, occasional things of life that happen to all of us. We all have different kinds of circumstances we deal with on a daily basis. But Paul says those pale in comparison to our condition, which is at the end of verse 5. The Lord is near. Those four words are key to our understanding how it is that we can rejoice always, no matter what. The Lord is near. That's our condition. Regardless of our circumstances, regardless of what kind of situation you find yourself in, that is your condition as a child of God. The Lord is near. Say those 4 words with me. The Lord is near. So that's what Paul says in the stories you've shared with me about that in the last couple of weeks. Some of you have gone out of your way to either email me or pull me aside and tell me a story about how God showed up in your life. I don't think it was because God is more active in doing that or decided to do that because the preacher preached it. I wonder if maybe we have noticed it more because we have thought about that and focused on it. So thank you for sharing those stories. I want you to keep doing that. Keep watching for God's work in your life. Now, it's important that we think about this condition that we have, that the Lord is near in whatever circumstance we're in, because when we talk about something like doubt, that's a big thing. In fact, I know we're in church and you're in a worship service and I'm preaching from the scriptures, and the word doubt probably would be one of the last words you would ever expect to be spoken in this setting. In fact, some of you are going to want to argue with me even now in your mind that he shouldn't be talking about doubt. We don't have doubt, we have faith. Well, can they coexist? Can we have faith and doubt at the same time? You see, I believe doubting is normal. It's human. It's real. If you have doubt in your life sometimes, I want you to know that what that means is that you're still alive. You're just real. You're human. Sometimes doubt is occasional and fleeting. It's momentary. Sometimes it's more than that. It's seasonal. Like right now in the holiday season, sometimes doubt really rises to the surface because there's a lot of pain in our lives due to certain things going on, even during the holiday season. Maybe it's the first holiday season you're approaching after the loss of a very close loved one. Maybe it's the 20th holiday season after the loss of a very close loved one. That pain brings doubt. Sometimes it's momentary, sometimes it's seasonal, sometimes it's lingering and lasting, and sometimes, if we're honest, if we're real, we will acknowledge that doubt is very, very dark. If you face doubt, if you're really wrestling over some things about your beliefs, especially your belief in God, you are as normal as any other human being on the planet. You need to realize that. Not beat yourself up about it, and not even consider it as sin, because I don't think it necessarily is. It's just part of our experience. So what can we do about it? Well, I think one of the healthiest things we can do is stop for a moment and actually consider the source of our doubt. Maybe it's the calamities and tragedies and disasters that happen in our world. Perhaps sometimes those tragedies, those disasters hit a little too close to home. Sometimes those horrific things are done by people that we know, that we've trusted, that we've believed in. And they disappoint us, and they let us down. They even deceive us. And we lose faith in humanity. Sometimes, on occasion, we disappoint ourselves. We lose faith in us. A lack of confidence rises up in us, in our individual abilities, because we've proven yet again in a particular situation that we were no match for it. And we have failed yet again in that area with that emotion or that reaction or that behavior or that habit or that addiction. And sometimes all those doubts that we have about the world in which we live and other people and even doubts in ourselves all wrap up together and package themselves in what we would say is our doubt of God. Now, mind you, God's not at fault. We are. But yet sometimes it causes us to doubt God. And yet there are times, maybe you've experienced this, when you think it is God's failing or falling short because God seems to be absent or at least far away and silent. Oh my goodness, sometimes the silence of heaven. That is the kind of silence you and I would agree is never golden. Does God care? Is he apathetic? Is he missing in action? I wonder if Paul ever thought like that, sitting in a jail cell for having committed the crime of preaching the name of Jesus. That was his only crime, was preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. You do remember, eventually Paul would even be executed. He would lose his life physically because he would not stop preaching about Jesus. I wonder if Paul had doubts. And yet Paul speaks to us and says, even in your momentary or seasons or lingering doubt, rejoice. Rejoice always. Rejoice, period. Rejoice is a choice. Well, I have to tell you, that is a challenging, daunting thing to consider. And so I want you to look with me very closely at verse 6 because I think there are some things in verse 6 that will really help us with the how-to because that's the whole thing, right? I mean, our souls cry out and say, well, yeah, but how? How do we do that? How do we do that? Well, I don't know if I want to call this a little formula or what. It's kind of a formula that I see, but I don't want to use that word too strongly because some people think, well, if you just do that and that and that, then everything will be okay. All my doubts will go away and everything will be all rosy and the Cowboys will win today and the Rangers will, repeat and, we'll have some more root beer floats and DiGiorno and drumsticks. Well, I don't think it works that way. I think there are other kinds of solutions that God brings to us when we do what he says do, and we'll see that in a minute. Let's look at the formula, I call a formula, of verse 6. Verse 6 says, stop being anxious about anything. Now, your version may say, do not be. But literally, Paul, the way he wrote this, says he wants you to cease that which is already going on. Stop being anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and pleading with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Stop being anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and pleading with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. I see three things Paul is encouraging us to do here. What I call kind of a three-step formula, if you will, to get somewhere with our doubt, to move forward with it, to reassure our souls that our faith in God is appropriate. The first step is we need to learn to take a breath. We need to learn to take a breath. That very first phrase in verse 6, stop being anxious about anything. We need to learn to take a breath. Now, let me say this about this anxiety stuff. I'm not an expert on it. I don't know a lot about it, but I know this. There are some people, like Paul's talking about, that suffer from anxiety about things. You know, things come up and you tend to worry about those things. And probably for you, those are certain things that you worry about or anxious about that may not bring me anxiety, but I have my list of things that really bring me anxiety. Paul says, stop that. Today, we know that there are people, and many of you maybe in this group, who have kind of an overarching mental health condition or situation that is referred to as anxiety, and you're seeking medical professionals' help, and you're on medication for that. I want to encourage you that when we read what Paul says about stop, he's not talking about, I don't think, that kind of level of overarching anxiety. Even if he is, I want to say just add this to what your doctor's already telling you, and keep, please, going to your doctor, and please keep taking your meds. Be grateful for those things that God has provided for us in this day and time, okay? But on those things that are just like occasional, seasonal kinds of things that cause us anxiety, Paul says stop doing that. And I think what he's saying is learn to take a breath. Now, we know how to do that physically. We're going to demonstrate that for a second. I want you to sit up straight, hands on your lap, both feet on the floor, if they reach. All right? Sorry. Just thought of that. Thought I'd help you a little bit, okay? All right? Now, I want you to take a breath in through your nose, hold it for a couple of seconds, and then breathe slowly out through your mouth. Do that with me. I hope at home you're doing this with us. Come on now. If you're driving, be careful. Okay, but still, all right, I want you to do it another time. In through your nose, hold it, out through your mouth. Now, we know how to do that, and when we do that, we know that our heart rate goes down, our blood pressure goes down, and probably some level of anxiety becomes more restful. But I want to suggest to you that the taking breath that Paul is probably talking about here, he doesn't say that literally, those are my words to interpret what he's saying about stop being anxious about anything, is I think more of taking a spiritual breath, like we just did physically. What would that look like? What would it look like for you to take a spiritual breath? Well, a suggestion is this. You were breathing just fine until I mentioned it, and then all of a sudden you became all conscious about how you were breathing. The reason you weren't thinking about it is because our breathing is part of our autonomic system in our body. It just happens in our body. As long as we're alive, we breathe. We don't even have to think about it. We don't have to go, now breathe. Okay, yeah. Okay, breathe again. Okay, and breathe again all throughout the day, right? But I got you to focus on your breathing for a second, and that helped lower your heart rate, lower your blood pressure, lower your anxiety. I think spiritually there's something we can do as well. We can, as often as we can, the rest of today, try to remember this. Say it with me. The Lord is near. One more time. The Lord is near. You and I go throughout the day forgetting God's presence. Like we forget to breathe. So for the rest of the day, I want you to focus not on breathing. I want you to focus on spiritual breathing. I want you to focus on the presence of God as often as you can the rest of today. And every time you do, I want you to try to focus on His presence for as long as you can until you forget. And then as soon as you remember again, focus again for as long as you can. I think that's kind of a spiritual breathing where we remember the Lord, say it with me, is near. That's a spiritual breathing I think we can do. Second thing Paul says is practice thanksgiving. Look in verse 6. Stop being anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and pleading with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. He's going to talk about praying, but we have to be praying with thanksgiving. It's not enough to just pray and plead and beg that God would come through and help us, but we have to add thanksgiving. So many times our prayers and our requests and our petitions are dry because they lack thanksgiving. So we need to practice thanksgiving. It's sort of like this week when you have your holiday meal. You will have turkey and dressing probably, and maybe a little bit of gravy on there in case somebody overcooked the dressing or the bird, okay? All right? But what do you really have to have at the table to make it Thanksgiving? What do you really have to have? Cranberry sauce. You got to have cranberry sauce. And I don't mean the homemade kind with little twigs and leaves and seeds and little orange pieces in there and stuff. Forget that. I'm talking about the stuff that slides out of a can. Thank you. I want the ridges on it. My favorite commercial right now is the little Jiggly Ocean Spray can of cranberry sauce. That's what I want. That's what I want. Valerie has 2 cans in the pantry right now. I've already seen them. Well, one is for the other 9 people who will be at our Thanksgiving table, and one is for moi. Don't even slice it. I want to be able to dig right through the ridges with my spoon as I put it on everything, maybe even some pie. Thanksgiving ought to be like that in our praying. Without thanksgiving, our praying is dry. We need to focus on what we have, what is good. In fact, Paul even says that right here. Look at verse 8. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if anything worthy of praise, think about those things. So he says, stop worrying, being anxious, and add all the stuff that you've got going for you. So spiritually breathe and practice thanksgiving. And a third thing he says is talk it out with God. Look at the rest of verse 6. Stop being anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and pleading, with thanksgiving, of course, let your requests be made known to God. Now, the way he says that last phrase is very interesting. Didn't we already say the Lord is near? Don't we believe that God knows everything? Then why do we need to let him know? Why do we need to let our requests be made known to God? What is that about? Is he deaf? Is he blind? Is he dumb? Does he care? Is he not paying attention? See, all those things that I would say are why I doubt God. But Paul says, no, the Lord is near. He says, let your requests be made known to God. You see, when you doubt that God's even there, and then you decide that you're going to talk to God, you've demonstrated what? That he's actually there. Because if he wasn't there, you wouldn't have anybody to talk to. So Paul says, let your request be made known to God. You're not convincing God of your need, you're convincing yourself of your need. You're letting God know that God knows that you know. That's what you're doing. That's what we're doing when we have this kind of talk. What would it be like for you to say, hey, God, I'm really not happy with you right now? I have a bunch of doubts. Maybe you don't just have a talk with God, you have it out with God. I'm telling you, God gets excited when his people come to him like that. Because it's an opportunity for them to remind themselves that he's real and for him to respond. What would it be like today if you were to take those things that are dark in your life, that are bringing doubt in, and you just tell God about them? Get honest with him. Let your requests be made known to God. And even let him know that these things are sucking joy right out of your life. You got time for a story? I like stories, and I think right now would be a good time for a story. So let me tell you this story. It's not one from my own personal life, though. It's not even from anybody I know. It's a story found in Mark chapter 9. It's a story of a dad whose son is possessed by a demon to the point where the dad has reached an end of knowing what in the world to do It's happened the boy's whole life. And he hears about Jesus and his healing power, and he runs into some of Jesus' disciples, and they've been healing people too because they've been sent out by Jesus. So this father brings his son to the disciples, and wouldn't you know it, the disciples can't pull it off. They can't do anything about it. They can't free the boy of the demon possession. So they tell Jesus about it. They tell Jesus about it, and Jesus says, well, bring the boy to me. And we pick up the story right there in Mark chapter 9, verse 20. So they brought the boy to Jesus. And when the boy saw Jesus, the spirit in him immediately threw him into convulsions, and falling to the ground, he began rolling around and foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked the father, how long has this been happening to him? Can you see the picture? This boy's rolling around, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus calmly, not in a panic, no hurry, just stops and asks the father, how long has this been happening to him? Did Jesus not know that? I think Jesus did know that. He's letting the gravity of the situation be real. The father says, since childhood, it has often thrown him both into the fire and into the water to kill him. So, if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. He's asked the Son of God of the universe, if you can do anything. He's got some doubt there, right? And yet he's requesting. He's letting his request be made known to God. Jesus said to him, if you can. I love the way that Mark writes that. If you can, oh boy. All things are possible for the one who believes. Immediately the boy's father cried out and said, here's your word. I do believe. Help my unbelief. Isn't that you and me? Even in the midst of our faith, our belief, there are times when unbelief, doubt shows up. And that's what we cry out to God about. God, I believe, but my faith and doubt balance is all out of whack today. Lord, help my unbelief. When Jesus saw that a crowd was rapidly gathering, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, you mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and do not enter him again. After crying out and throwing him into terrible convulsions, it came out. And the boy became so much like a corpse that most of them said, he's dead. But then Jesus took him by the hand and raised him up. And he got up. Two healings in this story, right? The boy who was demon-possessed was healed. Father, who had a whole lot of doubt, and yet still let his request be made known to God, was given faith. Back in Philippians 4, it says, do not be anxious, stop being anxious about anything, but on everything by prayer and pleading with thanksgiving, let requests be made known to God. Verse 7, and the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. The peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So, rejoicing because there's hope even in seasons of doubt. Would you pray with me? Would you take a minute and talk with God about your faith, doubt, balance right now? And if you have doubts, would you just talk to God about them? Let him know what they are. Let him know that you know that he knows that you know.